Welcome back to another Film Geek movie review. In just a moment, I'm going to be walking my happy butt over to the futon because I'm checking out the Netflix original Time Cut. So what's the plot of this movie? Well, it tells the story of a teenage girl who gets teleported back in time somehow to the year 2003. And why that's significant is because in the year 2003, there was a masked killer stalking the area she lived, and this masked killer killed her older sister who she never got to meet, and some friends of her older sister. So now that she's been teleported back in time, she decides, you know what? I'm gonna solve that murder and save my sister and her friends. This film comes to us from the people that made the Film Street series, which I did enjoy those movies. I thought they were some fun little slasher films. Didn't really bring a whole lot of new stuff to the genre, but then again, it didn't hurt anything either. It was a lot of fun, and I'm kind of expecting the same here. This looks like it's gonna be a very fun kind of slasher, probably a lot of over-the-top kills. They tease something in the trailer with an escalator that looks like it's going to probably be pretty dang vicious. This film comes to us from Hannah McPherson, the director of this film, and it's starring Madison Bailey, Michael Shanks, and Griffin Gluck. Alright guys, well you know what? My good old cat Haku is sitting over on the futon patiently waiting for me to finish this intro up so I can get over there and watch the movie with him. So it's enough of me sitting here jibber jabbering on. It's time for me to get over to the futon because I need to watch Time Cut. Welcome back, just getting done watching Time Cut, and guys, I did not care for this film. There was not a lot of things that I liked about this movie. I'm gonna have a really tough time when I get to the positives of this video. So let's get this thing started, shall we? We're gonna get things started with mostly negatives and then move into the positives to try to end this video on the ever so important high note. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about, I'm actually going to compare it a little bit to another film that came out last year. The name of the movie was Totally Killer. And the film, kind of a rough overview of its plot. It tells a story about a girl that goes back in time to try to help her mom save her mother's friends from a slasher. And there's a lot of fun tropes and goofiness from the 80s and all. And the film itself is played very tongue-in-cheek. It's mostly comedic value. There's some decent kills and a little bit of horror thrown into it. But all in all, the film was a comedy. And this movie does not have that same vibe. In fact, throughout the entire film, I had a very difficult time trying to understand who this movie was for. Because in the other movie, Totally Killer, it's fairly obvious that this is a movie that's made to be enjoyed by Gen X parents and their Gen Z kids, so they can sit down together, have a little movie that they both relate with, and then they come to that whole, see, things just weren't that different back then, now were they? Or maybe, you know what, things sure have changed. Whatever the case may be, that's what those movies are designed for. But in this case, I'm not quite sure who this movie was designed for. Because it's not for siblings, that's for sure, because these two never met each other, so they don't have any real connection in that case. And there's not really any kind of generational divide or anything like that. It's a very odd time. There's about 16 years difference between both of the sisters. Now, I myself, I do have a sister that's 10 years younger than me, but I find that to kind of be the limit. You don't hear that too often with those large age gaps coming from the same parents. So I didn't really understand why the filmmakers decided to go with something like that, with having the two of these be genetic sisters, I guess you could say, that had never met each other. It didn't really give the film a very solid emotional core, but it does get interesting later in the film, which I'm going to get to. They bring up some interesting facts that actually do bring some positives into this movie, so I'm not going to ruin it for you. We'll get to what I like about that in just a moment. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the pacing of this film, or just lack thereof. This movie is boring. I don't mean slow, I mean boring. Now, the movie starts off like most of your slashers. You have a pretty good setup. You get to see the slasher for the first time. There's a little bit of tension, and it ends on somebody almost getting killed because this movie is basically PG-13. It is TV-14, so yeah, it's about a PG-13. There are plenty of PG-13 slashers. Well, one comes to mind, honestly, that's pretty good and a lot of fun. I did enjoy the movie Megan. Again, this movie isn't like that because Megan actually worked as a horror film and with some lighthearted comedy thrown in there also, where this film doesn't try to do that at all. It tries to play it as a straight-laced horror film with absolutely no horror put into it whatsoever. The story just meanders on forever. There's no real tension with the killer. It's not like they're even really trying to figure out who the killer is, so when the reveal does happen, it does kind of make it very empty. Most of the movie spends its time trying to build a relationship between the two sisters, which isn't a bad thing, but at least throws some stuff interesting into it. I went ahead and paused the movie, and I want to say it was at the 37-minute mark before we even got another kill, another situation where somebody was going into some kind of slasher horror moment, and even those elements weren't played out to the very scary utmost. Like, for instance, as I was mentioning, that escalator scene looked like it was going to be something as vicious as that bread cutting machine in Fear Street, if I got it right this time. I don't know. Anyways, it was brutal, and so I was expecting some kind of crazy brutal kill scene there, but no, and I didn't get any kind of lighthearted comedy out of it either. All in all, the film was boring and bland. The killer in this, our slasher, was also extremely underwhelming. I'm not quite sure what they were going for with the design of the killer. Again, going back to the film Totally Killer, the killer, the slasher of the film, had a very 80s vibe to him. He looked like a Max Headroom kind of guy, like almost Max Headroom, best choice, always save, your local grocer, whatever generic brand. I'm talking about Max Headroom, but in this movie, I'm not quite sure what they were going for. It's just a guy in a plastic mask. There are some scenes where he just kind of looks like Matt Damon from Dogma. It doesn't necessarily strike any kind of fear in me whatsoever, and it doesn't tie anything into the year 2003. Now, if the movie would have done something like, oh, I don't know, made the killer wear just some kind of generic looking anime character mask, because in my opinion at least, I feel that anime was really starting to get its footing in that time period. I saw a lot of teenagers back then wearing t-shirts and whatnot. So yeah, if they would have given the character like just a generic anime guy mask or something like that, that brought it into the, into the time period, I think it would have given the character a little bit more emotional oomph or something at least. But it's just a dude in a plastic mask, and that's it. The motives of the slasher also, when you finally get down to it, it's not that great. And all in all, guys, it's just a very bland and boring movie. So here is the one good thing I'm going to say about this film. And it's not the acting. I decided not to get into that, but there is some really bad moments of acting in this film also. So anyways, I digress. And that is the concept of how time travel works in this film. I did like that. It's more of the spawning off different timelines rather than being able to go back in time and, change this and everything has this nice cohesive timeline and such. So I like the fact that it went with the more alternate idea of things branching off in different areas. I liked the idea of our main character. Her sole reason for existing was the death of her sister, and that could have brought in some really great elements into the film with the relationship, but they bring it up so late in the movie. I want to say that they start tapping into that area at the 20 minutes left in the film mark. I want to say that. It was like maybe an hour and 10 minutes. The movie's not long, but it feels like it goes on forever because of its awful pacing. Well, I went back into the negatives. So all in all, guys, this one moment where they bring up the idea of her being basically a baby built out of trauma and what that means, I thought that brought a little bit of emotion to the film, but they didn't build on it whatsoever to really bring in this film to make it a cohesive kind of thing. So in my opinion, guys, I'm going to give this movie my honest and rare skip it rating. I do not think this film is even worth your time if you are a subscriber to Netflix. I was kind of hoping this was going to be one of those movies I could say, sit down, have a fun, lighthearted slasher you can enjoy with your kids on Halloween, but this movie isn't even that. Find something else. You know, maybe Beetlejuice 2 is going to be on VOD or something at that point, I think. Maybe it's streaming, rental, who knows. Check that one out. That'll probably be a fun little family one. And go back and revisit the original Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy. Doesn't have a damn thing to do with the ride itself, which I understand. But it's a pretty fun little haunted family film if you're looking for something to scare the kiddos for Halloween. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. Thanks again for checking out the Film Geek. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you like what you saw here. Ring that bell for notifications and give me the old thumbs up if you like what you see. And if there's one more thing you can do, folks, that is keep watching movies. You know I'm gonna.